Okay, welcome to How Games Have Changed Storytelling. I'm Jose Smith. I'm your moderator. I am in the real world, I am a systems engineer specializing in security, and that right there gets to tell a whole bunch of interesting stories. But for the most part, I play heavy board games, RPGs, and run many different groups in the local area as part of GCOM, the Game Club of Maryland. And here with me, we have Daniel M. Ford. Please
Hi,
introduce yourself.
I'm Dan Ford. I'm a fantasy and mystery novelist, originally from Baltimore. As far as games go, I've been playing and running D&D and other RPGs for over 25 years now. I'm excited to talk about games and storytelling.
And Peter?
I'm Peter Bryant. I work for TSR Games, the new TSR Games. And I also have worked for a lot of other role-playing game companies. And I also write. I do not have anything published as of yet, but my first novel is quite nearly finished.
So you look at storytelling, and yes, whether it's inside a movie or even in a novel or a comic book, and you can even kind of push storytelling into music, but the games we play, we don't really look at that story. So, Daniel, do you is there a game that you see that really has an impact on storytelling?
I think the games I've played definitely have an impact on my storytelling, and I love the emergent narrative that comes out of playing Dungeons and Dragons or other RPGs. I think they have a tremendous, maybe sometimes detrimental effect on my own thinking, and possibly some things that happen in fiction maybe are a little too gamified these days. We can get into that later. But I don't think I'd be a fantasy novelist, or I wouldn't be the same fantasy novelist if I hadn't been playing D&D for a long time.
And Peter?
Yeah. So yes, playing games has definitely pushed my desire to write. So, and it's funny because it wasn't really the playing the games as much as it was designing a game. So I have designed a bunch of games that I've never published. I design them for fun because it's a fun hobby to do. But I have one that I'm working on that I'm going to publish. But in writing that game, I came up with a setting that I really, really enjoyed, and then I wanted to tell stories in that setting. So I have a novel that, as I was saying before, is almost finished, that is set in that setting. And it's not a novel of our game, because that's always horrible. It has nothing to do with our games playing. It's actually just it's a story. It's like a big story of what's going on in that to help explain that world.
No, you actually brought up something very interesting. It's all of us at one time have tried. Okay, let's take notes of things that went on during the session, and let's try to turn it into either a story. You can either do it as a play or maybe a short story or something. I know I haven't had very much luck with that, but I've had luck with compilations where we may have taken 20 sessions, snipped them down, and then now we can have a really interesting short story where we've amalgamated all that together as one quote-unquote perfect session. Peter, have you been able to do this?
No, so I'm not a fan of writing what we do in the game settings, mainly because I get an idea for a story in my head, and I visualize the whole thing, and I want it to play a certain way, and characters don't do that. Especially, each person are seeing the story in their own mind, their own way. So when the DM's running a game, there's a story that's going on in the game master's head, and then there's a story that's going on in each one of the players' heads. And if you could see inside of everybody's head, it would be a different story. And so I find that makes it too hard to actually write a story for. And I've read some stuff that was obviously someone had written as their adventures as a story, and did not care for it. There is something that was RPG lit. Is that what it's called? And some of that's okay if it's done right.
And Daniel?
Yeah, I think almost everybody at some point in a particularly exciting game session has said, man, this would make a great novel. We should collaborate on it. It probably won't, because you do have a narrative that is influenced by so many different voices. And as Peter said, everybody's seeing it differently. And also in most, certainly not all RPGs, but in many RPGs, there's so much combat that it would get so repetitive to detail every battle and every struggle and every trap and every dungeon. It would become really boring. It would become a grind. As you said, if you winnow it out and you can pull out things, you can pull out characters, or you can pull out scenes, you can pull out ideas. I've certainly sprinkled the names, somewhat of as an inside joke with friends, sprinkled the names of some of their characters into some of my novels, mostly so they can see that character in there.
And I've taken, real quick, I've taken some essence of characters that I've either played or other people have played that I really liked, taken the essence of that character and put it into a character in a story. One of the characters in this, the novel I wrote is absolutely a version of a character I played that I really liked, but it's not nowhere near exactly the same character. Matter of fact, not even the same genre. It's just the spirit of that character, the way the character acted and presented themselves, their mannerisms and stuff. I actually translated into the story.
I'd like to also, take an opportunity to remind the attendees the Q&A and chat functions are available. Q&A takes a little bit of time before it pops up for us to see it. So if you don't wait until the end to post your questions, please keep them PG, as children may be in attendance. And let's continue to have fun.
Yeah.
So now when you also are kind of telling a story inside because really RPGs are collaborative storytelling. We're all coming together. We're trying to tell a story together. What happens when a PC has been slowly being pulling away and now has become, the boss fight? They become the opposite side. Do you shift your storytelling to put them in a negative light, or do you break the party apart? Does your storytelling change when the groups drift a little bit? Daniel?
I think to some extent it depends on the game system, right? There's some game systems that if a PC acts a certain way enough times, guess what? They're now a GM character, and they get to do whatever I say they do. That particularly happens in Adventures in Middle-earth, which is a 5e implementation of Tolkien, right? Of the Lord of the Rings, where if a character sort of does enough bad things, they're going to turn evil, and they're now a game master character, right? And that has to do too with the tone of the game you're playing, right? If you need to know that, you need to have buy-in from everybody going into the game. Like, this is going to be, I want you to be heroes. I want you to be a good aligned party, and everybody needs to buy in for that. If you want it to be a little more gray, or you want to open it up so everybody can be any alignment, and we're gonna all be adults and figure out how to make that work. Personally, I don't know about splitting up the party. I definitely abide by the old sort of gamer, never split the party for any reason, especially if I'm the GM. You do that, you're just making more work for me, and there will be grudge monsters.
Grudge monsters. Oh my God, never heard that term. That's awesome.
Oh, it's a Hackmaster term. Really
is it?
Good.
Okay.
It's
okay.
The dinner table.
Right. I know what that is. I just haven't read that before. That's funny.
Hackmaster used to do, inside the Hackmaster system, there was a point system for if players started doing things, eventually you could drop a grudge monster on them, and it was a monster that was more difficult and had less gear and less XP. So you were doing more work to kill something that was just going to beat up
awesome.
on you.
That's
so Peter,
fantastic.
How about you? Yeah, maybe the PCs or maybe a PC is acting as the antagonist.
Oh my God! So this has happened 2 times. That was very well. Okay, so it happened 2 times, and then 1 time was 2 players went at each other. Every single time we've been able to manage that fairly well, and it's actually led to some really funny and amazing adventures. Our group has been playing together forever, and we're very good at letting people do whatever they want to do and playing, not giving into outside game knowledge. Like, if I know that, the other player at the table, I'll say John, I'm just going to make that up. Let's say John is doing something that's going to go directly against me, and I know he's doing something horrible, but I only know that because outside of the game, I know that. I can, we're very good at playing with keeping that knowledge the way it is. So we can do that, and we can actually go up against that. And we've had 2 instances where that has happened. and both of them were really funny. They were a lot of fun. Where the one of the PCs just wound up becoming the bad guy and went against the rest of us. And then there was another incident where there was 2 players that went against each other, and that was really funny too because they were able to resolve it. But it's fun. What's most fun about it is that when you play together for a while and you know each other, and you know how that person's going to react as the bad guy character. If you're the one doing that, going down the bad road, you know how to play that person. Like, you know how to do things that they won't suspect, or know how to dupe them or whatever. And especially if they don't know that you're the antagonist yet, because you have inside game knowledge on them, and that's fun. But we've been able to mitigate that pretty well.
Now we have a pertinent question from John Coxon. To what extent do you think systems that introduce GM character takeovers are helpful? I've always felt that if someone gets to the point where there needs to be a rule for a GM to divorce a player from their character, there's been a fundamental breakdown in the role play, but is that necessarily true? How do players react when this happens? I like to start there. When I've had game systems where it doesn't really deal with this divorce, it's usually we handle it because it starts to become a rift within the game group. And it's easier to say, okay, you can't play this character anymore, or we may end up just stopping that session there and say, okay, we're going to pick up a new game system, or start a new campaign, or just create a new band that will continue this campaign forward. Because for us, it has always seemed like the divorcing your character, more than likely something went wrong. Peter?
Yeah. So one of the things that we've come to understand over the years, and it's taken a little bit, was that people say this is what my character would do, and it's like you realize that they've made a character that's not compatible with the rest of the group, and that's okay, so that happens. But then we have this kind of like road that we go down, that we talk about this. We're like, well, yeah, but it's your job to like find a way for your character, for it to be okay with your character. Like, yes, your character would not do what we're doing, but you've made this character and you want to play with us and you want to stay in this group and you don't want to leave this campaign and we can't continue with it. So what can you do to get your character to go down that road? Do they have a change of heart? Do they see things in a new light? Do you want to make up a new character? And it's we usually work it out. They usually, there's usually like, all right, you know what, my character's it's going to have it's going to come to a conscious decision that what they're doing is wrong, or whatever, or what the road that they're chasing is not a good one for them.
And Daniel?
Yeah, the 2 systems I can think of off the top of my head where there are definite mechanics to lose a character in that way are Adventures in Middle-earth and Star Wars WEG D6.
Yeah.
Both of those games are based in a world where there are clear lines of good and evil. There is clear good, there is clear evil, and there's not a whole lot of gray, right? So if you're going into playing that game, you need to have that discussion at the beginning and make sure everybody's bought into that tone, right? This is the tone of the game. This is how we're playing it. This is what we're going to do. I think that also the thing to bear in mind is that the number one rule, the rule that supersedes all other rules, is that everybody's there to have fun, right? And if one person's actions, because they're saying my character would do X, and what X is always the most like obstructionist or most disruptive thing, like you might be starting to get in the way of other people having fun. And then it's time to have like an out of character conversation about that.
Or you could even have it doesn't even have to be a destructive character. It could be, well, sorry, I am a pacifist merchant.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not helping out in fights, and all I'm doing is collecting loot to sell it in town. Well, you're not helping the party. And
Right.
that goes into the next one I'd like to talk about is we see a lot of gamification, like the MMO gamification, slowly getting into RPGs and even to some of the board games where, we have to have a tank, we have to have a healer, we have to have a DPS, which we saw in D&D 4th edition. How do you feel that changes the storytelling elements inside your RPG? Daniel?
I am always of the opinion when I'm starting to run a new game as a GM, I will say, look, I don't care if you want to make a party of all rogues, if you want to make a party of all clerics, like we'll figure it out. I'm not that invested in making sure that the mechanics work. I'm much more interested in a character concept and how you decide to express that concept through the mechanics of the game, right? So I'm willing to chuck that stuff out, and the need to have, like, you have to have a healer and you have to have a tank and you have to. I'm willing to get rid of that and flex the rules of the game so that the people who are playing can express the character concept they want in the way that they want.
But with something like fourth edition, it really pigeonholed you into you had to have the cards available to do your actions, and trying to do an action outside of what was prescribed on the text became very difficult unless you started homebrewing out of the system.
Yeah, right. I found fourth edition to be a really good tactical miniatures game.
Yes.
It was not my ideal role-playing game, I'd say. I'm not ragging on it. I think for what it was really well designed.
And Peter?
Yeah, so we've broken away from archetype type games for a very long time now. So most of the games, like we haven't actually played D&D as a group. Oh man, probably not even since the 80s. And we've always shied away from games that have like a particular like funneling effect of you are this. Like there's no such thing. We don't play games where you're a fighter. It's you're a fighter because you fight well. Or, you know, you're not a magic user, but your character can do magic, so I guess that makes you a magic user or whatever. Mostly like skill-based type things. So we don't generally tend to like have like a tank or a one type of character. We have people that kind of lean into these things a little more than others. What's been difficult is having people diversify enough, because there are certain things in a game that everybody, if you have certain abilities or skills or whatever, there's always these ones that everybody wants or everybody would normally want because, in a fight, this is the best thing to have, or this is one of the really cool things to have. And then everybody winds up being the same character. So we've been trying to avoid that, and we've gotten pretty good at it because I think we generally tend to now kind of have like a little bit of a pre-campaign meeting as to this is what we're going to be playing. What kind of roles do you see yourself going down? And then we kind of make sure that we cover the bases, but it's not very hard lined in any one direction.
And something that we've really been, I don't know if it'd be hampered by, is the GM having to have the storyteller, or even having to have the AI that is running the system. We had Alec S. is saying games, especially like Mansion of Madness, their latest edition, they introduce an AI that allows players to play the game without having someone to run it. So Alex S. was saying games have better and better AI. How close are we to interactive generative fiction so that you have the authors or storytellers helping building the back end, but then they're not actually writing the complete stories, and the readers / players are actually creating the characters and experiencing those stories. Peter?
All right. So if we're talking, role-playing games, there are a lot of games out there now that are cooperative games, sort of like Fiasco. I think Urban Shadows is kind of like that. And I know Children of the Fall is like that. And those are fun games because they're GM-less. Everybody takes a turn telling their part of the story, and then the next person tells part of the story. And there are game mechanics, so there's dice to roll and things to do. So there's that. For writing, so like for fiction, the only way I can see doing that, because I mean when you're writing a story, you're writing a story, right? I mean the story, there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. Things have to happen, people change, there's all the rules to writing, which makes it interesting. There's one exception though, and that is like the choose your own adventure style type books where you actually take a participation in the book. I have a comic book artist friend of mine who did something, he calls it Split Decision, and it's a graphic novel. And as you read through the graphic novel, you actually make decisions on what the characters do, and you go through. So you're sort of kind of telling that story at the same time. So I would say those are the only two places that I kind of see that.
And Daniel?
I have nowhere near the kind of like technological background to understand how an AI works or how you procedurally generate fiction. From a selfish point of view, as someone who wants to sell novels, I hope a long time. I hope that's far, far away. you know, so I tend to be very skeptical of the human authors are out the door soon, because I feel like I've heard that. I feel like I've heard it's 5 years away for 15 years now.
Yeah.
And I feel like I hear that with a lot of sort of emerging technologies. Oh, we're 5 years away from this. We're 5 years away from this. And I hear that every 5 years for 20 years now. So I don't see AI taking over for like novelists and story writers anytime soon. In RPGs, I think there's a great opportunity to have those sort of GM-less games where the game guide and the game rules are there to facilitate that collaborative story. And I know there's some of those like board game / RPG hybrids. I'm trying to think of one. I don't want to go to the Tolkien well too often, but there's that Legends of Middle Earth or whatever it's called. That's
Well,
like
then also like Arabian Nights,
Yeah.
Tales of Arabian Nights.
Yeah.
Um,
But more and more I see that there's games where there's like an app component that can run the game for you, right? So that you can just play out the game. You can play it one or two people, and the app sort of does all the math and lays out, like procedurally generates the board and the events that happen. And I think that is, especially now, you don't need to get 5 or 6 people together to play this big expensive game with all these pieces, right? I think there's probably a lot of opportunity there.
and then kind of games like Gloomhaven, which is huge box, lots of minis, stories on the cards, and we would read the stories out loud
Mm-hmm.
and then sort of keeping track of what's going. Or we had to hear a suggestion from Megan of Betrayal at House on the Hill, where you get a basic story at the turn, because then you have to crack open and find out, okay, what is the end game condition now? And both of you sitting down reading your book to figure out what your new role is a nice way of storytelling. But it just seems like we see these RPG, the MMO RPGs or the old Neverwinter Nights or Baldur's Gate, where you had these big stories, and then it was you're choosing how to move through the environment. But is that a fresh telling of the story, or is that okay? I'm just running through this and just clicking next because I just wanted to kill the next thing. But
Yeah, so from a role playing standpoint, one of the things that I'm working on a module right now for the Top Secret game, and it's a rehash of an older module that we had, and I've updated it somewhat. One of the things that I'm doing is there's a section, part of the module, where you have to travel through the desert, and there are random encounters you can run into in the desert. And before the earlier version of this, the random encounters were not really story elements. Like you run into stuff and it's like, it could be something, may not be anything, whatever. So what I did is I beefed all them up. They're actually, every encounter is something that can happen. Like there's something to it. And a bunch of them are tied together, and they have ramifications in the later part of the module, but you don't need any of them. You don't need to run into any of them. And there are 10 of them, and you're only going to run into 2 or 3 on the way in and 2 or 3 on the way out. Right. So you probably won't hit all of them. And then every time if you run this module again later, it could be a completely different module, because you could run into different things and different things would happen, and you go down different roads. So it's almost like it's not a choose your own adventure module, but it's almost like a randomized module for a portion of it. There is a bigger story that happens in the middle. So in the middle, there's the thing that you're actually really doing. But so I'm looking to play with that more, because I hadn't intended to do that. When I started writing this, I was just kind of beefing this thing up. But then as I was doing this, I was like, oh my God, this could be a thing. I could write an entire module that is almost completely randomized, so that you could play this module over and over again and have a different adventure every time.
yeah, let's see. So what I was speaking about with like Gloomhaven, where as you go in, you're going to get a card. You're going to get a sidetrack card as you're going into the dungeon, and that's going to help modify you into that fight and change it a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But Ryan Lockett did a very good storytelling experience with Above and Below and Near and Far,
Mm-hmm.
which has a nice booklet of, okay, flip through that page and see what's going on now in the story. Where you have things like Dead of Winter, which is built on a story. It's almost like a collaborative storytelling with a board game just happened to be thrown on the table at the same time.
Right.
Because you have all these interesting, just difficult decisions to make on these cards, and hopefully there isn't a traitor in the midst.
Right.
Daniel?
What question are we on exactly?
Oh, this is a more of how the decisions in. So it's not just choose your own adventure.
Sure.
There are little extra decisions out there for these types of platforms.
Yeah, I mean, I know I can't even begin to fathom how many times I've replayed Baldur's Gate or started playthroughs of Baldur's Gate and Baldur's Gate 2, and I always say I'm going to make different choices this time. I'm gonna get this ending, and I don't. I wind up with the same party, and then I either stop playing or I just go through it again because why not? Who doesn't want to see Minsk's journey come to its triumphant conclusion? Yeah, I don't really have a lot of game design perspective. I know that even when I'm playing a game that is sort of light on story, because I'm sort of a narrativist and a storyteller and a story seeker by nature, I will start making it into a story even when it doesn't have one. Even if it's just dice rolls and the result, like my friends and I who play games and we've been playing together since college in 1998, we'll start turning it into a story. We'll start narrating the things that happen and speaking in character when our character is just a card and a collection of stats. We'll still make them into a story because we just can't help it, right? That's how we play a game.
Now that actually brings us to the next that's a perfect segue into, should the stats get in the way of storytelling? If I'm a barbarian, should I be able to sweet talk my way into a free room at the inn?
I think you should be able to try. I think you should always have that option. You should be able to try to do the thing. I don't think I'm a barbarian, but I should be able to cast spells because I say I want to. I think we're not playing the right game then, right? But I think just because you're a barbarian doesn't mean you can't sweet talk your way. Doesn't mean you can't use your charisma to flex your way in there or impress your way in there. Sure, give it a shot. I think that stats should be serving the storytelling, right? And I think when I make a character and I have a dump stat, I'm going to try and role play that dump stat, right? If I have a character who's got a low strength, he's going to not be thrilled when he has to carry a full load of stuff back to town or when he has to help push a wagon out of a ditch. He's going to try and talk his way out of that. He'll say, you didn't hire me for my muscle, that kind of thing. So I think it's about, it all goes back to understanding the game you're playing, having the buy-in with the people you're playing it with, and working together to serve the story and to serve having fun. Right.
And Peter?
I think we have to remember that storytelling, making mistakes is part of storytelling, and it's what's funny. It often makes sometimes it's the best part of the adventure when you're stuck in a position, or best part of a story when someone who's horrible at that thing has to do that thing. And if you embrace that as both a player and a reader, or as a game master, you're going to have more fun at the table. I think getting away from this, I'm not strong, so I'm not doing anything that involves strength. It's like, wow, you're really shortchanging yourself, because if you got yourself into a situation where strength was an issue and you had to struggle with it, sometimes that struggle is much more fun, because that's the thing, you're overcoming something like that. In movies, when we watch movies and the protagonist isn't particularly good at what they're doing and they're struggling with it. I mean, take for example, so let's take a super popular property like Harry Potter, right? Harry Potter eventually becomes the chosen one or whatever, and is, great mage and stuff. But in the early parts, he's horrible at everything, right? Hermione's so much better than he is at everything, and all of them really in the beginning. But it's more fun to watch that character grow and do those things. If the character is excellent at everything that they do and they only do those things, how much fun is that? Like, okay, great. You're a great fighter and you want to fight. Yay. What good is that? It's much more fun when the fighter has to win a dance competition, or at least compete in a dance competition, right? That's hilarious and it's great. And you're going to remember that. You're not going to remember winning that fight against someone that you should have won against. So I think those are things that we need to make sure that we embrace is that when, your character should not be good at everything, and it's fun. It can be just as much fun doing something that's difficult for your character as it is for doing things that you're excellent at.
Which brings us to the next point of, what if, that main character becomes overpowered? As we've seen in the Sword of Truth series, you get this power curve that comes up, and then you can almost see where the author says, oh no, we have to stop, bring him back down to a reasonable level. Otherwise, you don't have a villain that can really stand up to him, or you have to have a villain that's at this level, and now no one else can deal with that villain. Peter?
Yeah, that's the level up problem. Okay. So, and it's always the case. We play games, and same thing in stories and movies, and every time you level up something, or level up the character, you have to level up the villain. And it's like, are you really getting any better? Because if you're getting better, your enemies have to get better, or else there's no challenge, right? So you're always at a challenge. So you're always trying to get better. And it's like that eternal chase that you're doing. And it happens in stories too. Like you said, the characters start getting better, and their villains have to get better, or you lose interest. We did a campaign one time where we didn't do levels so much. We didn't worry about leveling up. There's no experience points. We decided we were going to make the characters we wanted to play. So you had as many points as you really wanted to spend, make the character you want to make. And then that was it. And you're not going to get any more experience points, maybe a little bit here or there if you want to learn something new. Like, I don't know, like let's say you wanted to learn dance, right? Your character wanted to learn how to dance. You could do that. But it wasn't like, you're not going to get any better at your pistol. You're already as good as, that's what you do. And that was a super fun campaign because none of us had to worry about like experience points or leveling up and stuff. We just played, and it was amazing. It was really good. That's not every campaign. We're not doing that now, but it's an interesting experiment to play with.
Yeah, the Shadowrun system is very much similar to that, where you're pretty much playing your end game character when you start Shadowrun. You might get a little bit of tweaking changes here and there. But
Right.
Daniel, what's your take on this?
So I feel like power creep can be a real problem in games and in fiction. I also think, somewhat related to this, earlier when Peter mentioned, making mistakes is sometimes the most fun thing. I feel like sometimes that gamification and that power creep, wanting to know how powerful every character is, right? And wanting to know exactly what every character can do, and wanting to have these really set rules for magic and things like that. I think that can be a real problem in fiction. I think that can really handcuff creators if they get too locked into those notions, right? I don't want to see everybody's spell book when they're introduced, right? I don't want to see their level. And I think that sometimes that gamification and sort of desire for optimization, we all know a player who is just really good at figuring out how to optimize a system, right?
Mm-hmm.
To do the best thing. And I think sometimes you see people criticizing fiction, whether it's movies or whether it's books, like, well, why didn't the protagonist just do X, Y, and Z and they would have won? Well, because people don't always make the optimal decision, right? Humans make mistakes all the time. And narrative is not about optimization. Narrative is not about making the best choice. Narrative is not about my power level relative to your power level. And because if it is, then instead of writing a book, I might as well just give you the stats and make it a board game, right? Or let you roll the dice to figure out what's going to happen between the protagonists and the antagonists.
Yeah, what is it? Fly the eagles to Mordor and drop the ring. It's like, why not just do that?
I hate that so much.
No, I know. There's the whole Nazgul and all that. I'm just saying.
I know that's just like theologically and morally, the Eagles show up when people have expended their last ounce of ability and they can't possibly progress any further. It's not something Gandalf can just ask for. It's right. A Deus Ex Machina in a mythological sense.
No, I know. I'm just saying that's what causes those kind of questions to come up.
Yeah.
It's like, why not just do this?
Well, actually, you just brought up a really good point. Both in video games, you see it very common that Deus Machina pop in because it's just, okay, we need to wrap up the story. We've completed our development hours. It's time to just wrap this up, have one last boss battle, give them something so that they can fight to complete this boss battle, and then move on.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see this? How do you see this as a problem in story writing, Daniel?
I think in story writing, it all depends on what your goal in telling the story was. And you know, not every challenge is about power, right? Some challenges are about attitude, and some challenges are about. So, if I can take an example from my own fiction, in the Paladin Trilogy, the main character was a knight and a professional soldier, right? He was essentially a professional soldier for many, many years. He leaves that life. He becomes a paladin. He winds up as sort of the adopted father figure to an extraordinarily powerful character, this like 13-year-old who can essentially reshape reality. And the challenge for him is, for the main character, Alistair, is all the models of like masculinity that I've had my entire life don't work for this boy. I can't teach him to be a knight. I can't teach him to be these things. And it would be wrong to try to do that. So how do I figure out how to help him reach his potential? How do I teach him to be a good person, to be a good man instead of a great one, right? And that is his central challenge. That central challenge isn't a sword fight. It's not something he can hit. It's not something he can charge on horseback, right? It's something he has to deal with internally and deal with in relationships with a sort of found family.
Well, that's cool. So you have two characters with growth.
Yeah.
Actually, we have a question that comes that very similar. I'll condense it a little bit. John Coxon says, so we had the discussion of storytelling and power creep, but if failure and lack of competence can be an interesting opportunity for roleplay, do you have any tips for encouraging players to be comfortable in role-playing failure as opposed to seeing in the game as basically we're solving these problems and using only the mechanics provided to us? Because we've seen this in many, many novels where yes, you can see the early stages of development, and especially with Feist, where we had the Magician series, where at the early books it was very low power creep, but that very low power, and then you had to deal with that low power, but then it ramped up real quick.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, I think that comes from your game master, right? So if you're playing a game and you want to encourage people to play on their mistakes and flaws and all that kind of stuff, as a game master, you have to make sure you instill trust that you're not just going to kill characters out of hand if they make mistakes. Like, it's okay to make mistakes, right? It's like if you make a mistake or you do something, or you you intentionally do something, your character can't do that well because it's the right, it seems like the right thing story-wise. You have to make sure that the players understand, I, as the GM, are not going to punish you for playing your character. You're going to have hardship. Like if you fail, there's going to be a consequence for failure, but I'm not just going to go, okay, the dragon leans over and bite your head off. Okay, next, that comes from the game master, because that's why players are afraid to make mistakes or do things wrong. They're afraid because they're going to get punished and they're going to lose their character, or something really horrible is going to happen to their character that, it's like, oh, great, I don't get to play the rest of the night.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes that can come from the mechanics too. I agree that the GM is hugely important in that role, but I'm thinking of the Powered by the Apocalypse games where you only get XP when you fail.
Learn from your mistakes.
If you succeed all the time at everything you try to do, you never have to get better, right? You're never being challenged. So the way you get XP and the way you level up is by recording XP when you fail at what you're trying to do, right? And as a GM, you can encourage that, and you can give XP for role play, and you can give XP for a character who has tried and failed to do something, and still reward them for playing that out well. Right? So it doesn't have to just rely on the mechanics.
Where you have also games like, if we go back to Hackmaster, that yes, it was meant to be a spoof on second edition D&D, but it had something like 300 skills. And you could not do something unless you had a percentage in that skill, and you could not advance in that skill unless you use that skill. So if you had a 13% dig hasty grave, you're going to dig a hasty grave, fail, and then you're going to mark it up. It doesn't matter if you passed or failed. You mark, okay, I used it. Now you
Right.
may have to dig 7 hasty graves before you're able to get one good enough so that you can finally throw your party, either a party member or an orc into it, because that'll give you more XP for being able to provide a service. And that the whole point of that system was everything you're doing is only to get XP. You're constantly doing every little action, being nice to an NPC. Well, okay, good. That may give you a little bit XP or may give you some coin.
That was kind of the joke to the system, right? I mean, that's the whole point. It's supposed to be goofy.
It's supposed to be goofy. And then you have systems like Everyone is John, where you have a game master that is John, that is playing that, but all the players are the one are responsible for his actions. And then that's where you get the story going through. And John has no skills. So the voices in his head are the only ones that can give him the ability to do something. So of course he's going to be bad at everything. And then once someone loses control and someone else comes in, they might be good at something. They could be good at hot wiring a car while the other guy was good at juggling hot dogs.
Well, I'll tell you, the second edition of 7C, I spoke with John Wick, who's the designer of it, and we were talking about some of the mechanics and things that he had put in there that were really kind of neat. There was the death spiral, which, as a character takes damage, they get worse at things. So as they get worse at things, they take more damage, because like you're at -2 to do all your actions. Like, great, at -2, now I'm going to get hurt even more. And then you get hurt more. So he flipped the script on that. He said, in action movies, when the hero starts getting damaged, that's when they really start to shine.
Yeah.
Right. So you actually get bonuses when you take damage. You actually fight better. And another thing that he put in there was, so you have these fate points that you can spend to do things, which give you like, oh, I missed. Okay, spend a fate point. You get to roll again or whatever, right? You only get so many of those. They're not super easy to get. They're fairly easy to get, but they're not super easy to get. But you can always get one for failing. So you can just go, I fail this, and you get a hero point, because it's sort of like karma, right? It's like all right, I jump off, let's say you're on a ship and you're going to jump down to the lower deck on top of 2 guys and trying to smash their head together, and you go, but I fail. So you jump off and you hit the ground and you go rolling between the 2 guys, and then I don't know, maybe they notice you and maybe they hit you once or twice or whatever, and then you can get up and then you can do your fancy thing because you needed a hero point to do your special maneuver, right? So that's how you got that hero point. So you failed, you jump up, you spin around, you kill both of them. But that was kind of a neat thing you could play with. Now there were times where it's like, no, don't fail. It's like all right, I'm going to jump off the boat into the water and try to swim to shore, but I'm going to fail this roll. No, don't fail that one, because that will be drowning. So yeah, so the system can play into that, and it can make it a lot of fun.
Okay, so we're coming close to the end. Would you like to have anything you wish to promote, Daniel?
Sure. You can find my most recent novel is called Cheap Heat, and it's it's a private detective novel in the Jack Dixon series. For those of you who are from in and around Maryland, Jack Dixon lives on a houseboat in Northeast Maryland in Cecil County, and is a private detective. But it came out on May 1st. You can get it Amazon, Kobo, Barnes & Noble, direct from my publisher. But I will note that there's a certain part of that book is about independent wrestling, an independent wrestling circuit. And all of the wrestlers that are mentioned in it come from sessions of the Worldwide Wrestling RPG that I put with my longtime friends. They're all characters we created. That's the part of the mystery. He's hired to be a bodyguard for a wrestler who's getting death threats.
Cool.
A lot of the book. So yeah, and the Paladin Trilogy, which is it's sort of one of the best compliments I got is that someone told me in the fight scenes they felt like they could hear the dice rolling behind the scenes. So I think if you play D&D, you know what a paladin is. So the Paladin Trilogy, the Jack Dixon novels, you can find me on Twitter at Sounding Line. I'm not really sure why that's my Twitter handle. It's a nautical term. I just threw it in the, I just sent it to all panelists. I meant to send it to all panelists and attendees. And DanielM4.com. And I'll be in the Discord after this for a little while if people have questions or want to talk about anything. Thank you very much for coming.
And Peter?
All right, I work for TSR Games. We make products like Top Secret New World Order. Fantastic new version of the old Top Secret game. I also have a podcast that I do. It's a video podcast, much like what you're watching here. I've been doing it for 6 years now, called Mythwits. And you can go to mythwits.com and find out all about that. And go to tsrgames.com to find out about TSR stuff. We're also on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and all the places. And I am working on a novel, but I'm not going to talk about it right now any more than I already have because it's not done and shouldn't be talking about that stuff until you have it finished, really.
I'm Jose Smith. I do a lot of Maryland local board gaming. I do photos of all the games I play. That's at Digital Moochnik on Twitter. Please visit Game Club of Maryland.com or .org for dang it. People message me and it goes to private. There we go. And there. The Games Club of Maryland.org helps with gathering together to get people so that we can play games and continue to play games in this social distancing. So there still is groups on there that are meeting online to play video games. And I hope you all stay healthy and safe and have a wonderful virtual Balticon.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, everybody.